Corey Day signed a development contract with Hendrick Motorsports starting in 2025, and Ross Chastain and Shane Van Gisbergen will drive for Junior Motorsports part-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Noah Gragson's 2025 ZEP scheme that we'll see in 2 races in 2025. This scheme looks very similar to Chase Briscoe's scheme he had in 2024. I do think it looks really good. Front row did a very solid job on it. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this season. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sheldon Creed's 2025 Friends of Jacqueline scheme that we'll see in a majority of races in 2025. There's a few differences to the one he had at Joe Gibbs Racing. This seems like the number's a little more white than it was at Joe Gibbs. I think it does look very solid and pretty good. The Friends of Jacqueline will be joining up with Sheldon Creed at Haas Factory. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Ankram's 2025 Lee Uena scheme that we'll see in 2025 in pretty much majority races this season. There's really no changes from 2024. Looks very similar to the 2024 scheme, but I gotta say, it does look solid overall. I don't think you really need to make any changes from the previous year. It does look okay, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Rebel's 2025 Ream scheme that we'll see in 14 races this season. There's not really many differences to the scheme from 2024, but the Ream scheme from last year was absolutely golden. It did look really good. I think they nailed it at Joe Gibbs Racing. This one looks really, really good. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Busch's 2025 Cheddar scheme that we'll see in a lot of races in 2025. There's no changes from 2024 to this year, but I gotta say, why would you change it? Because the Cheddar scheme, in my opinion, looks really, really good. I think that RCR has done a solid job on their paint schemes. This one's no exception. It does look pretty solid. It definitely does look really, really good. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tim Veens. As it was reported, I think, by RJ Starvik a couple days ago on Thursday that Tim Veens is expected to run the truck race at Daytona International Speedway. He's also expected to make select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series also in 2025, but is working on sponsorship for that currently at the moment. Tim Veens has been in the NASCAR world for many, many years, a very controversial figure in the NASCAR world, but I'm very intrigued to see what team he's going to drive for. I'd have to think Rheum would be one of the options, and we're going to talk about Rheum here in just a short little bit. Other than that, I'm not quite sure exactly what team he could end up driving for in 2025. It's going to kind of be interesting to figure that out at this point. I don't know what big teams are going to want to work with him. There's been a lot of controversy around this guy over the last couple of years. We'll see where he ends up going and where he truly ends up driving in 2025. I'd have to think it could be Rheum. We'll have to wait and see who he truly ends up driving for in 2025 at Daytona International Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Craftsman Truck Series race at Talladega. As it was reported by many reporters in the industry that NASCAR has adjusted the starting time for the truck race at Talladega on October 17th. So instead of the race starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the race is going to be starting at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. I looked up the sunset time for Talladega during the time, which is going to be later than last year's race, and I think it's going to be 6:08 Central Standard Time. Let's say that there is a big red flag and there's rain that comes to the track, which is certainly possible at Talladega during this time. You're going to run into the issue of getting this race in. I feel like the starting the race a little bit earlier in the day would have made a lot more sense. I really honestly do not understand the call here to move the race back a little bit. I get you want ratings and people will probably be home at that point, but at the same time, the best thing you could do is get the race in a little bit earlier. I question starting the race later in the day, especially with the fact you're pushing it back closer to darkness at a track that doesn't have lights. I feel like with tracks that do not have lights, you shouldn't be pushing start times back and potentially not get the race in. That's just my personal opinion. I think it's kind of not the best decision to move a race back later. If a track had lights, it'd be fine and understandable, but Talladega doesn't have lights. So personally, I don't think they should be pushing the date back at any point, in my honest opinion, for 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Franco Calpino. As it was announced on Thursday that Franco Calpino has signed a multi-year contract with Alpine and will be a reserve driver for the team in 2025. There was a lot of talk about this very much likely happening in 2025, where he would sign a contract with Alpine. Now, like it was mentioned, he will be the reserve driver currently at the moment. However, if Jack Doohan struggles with Alpine at the start of the 2025 season, there is a really good chance and possibly that Franco Calpino is going to end up replacing Jack Doohan. So despite the fact that Jack Doohan has only made one Formula One start, hasn't even gotten in the car for 2025 yet, he's already on the hot seat going into this year. I personally don't think that's fair to Jack Doohan, especially this early into the year, but Alpine's going to do what Alpine wants to do, and if they feel like that Franco's good enough to do it, they're going to put him behind the wheel. I really just think that Alpine should wait until 2026 if they want to make a move. I think putting him as a reserve driver does make a lot of sense, but I do not believe that he should be replacing Jack Doohan, but there is a chance, unfortunately, Jack Doohan is going to get replaced by Franco Calpino in 2025, which would be unfortunate, but it wouldn't be the most shocking and surprising thing overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Moto GP. As it was reported by Adam Stern a couple days ago on Thursday, that Moto GP is waiting a change to its media rights deal in the US for 2025, and Fox Sports is a current landing spot to be the favorite to pick up the TV deal for them in 2025. They're also looking for some sort of Drive to Survive-like series also for 2025. MotoGP is looking to grow their popularity in the United States. We all know that MotoGP is not the most popular motorsport in the world, and one of the biggest reasons I think they're trying to get a U.S. branding is because of the Trackhouse branding. Remember, Trackhouse Racing owns a team currently in MotoGP at this current moment in time, so that's a pretty big reason why they want to figure out a way to get MotoGP to grow in the United States in a pretty massive way. And I gotta say, it would be really interesting if MotoGP got on Fox. Now, would they take it seriously and put the work into the broadcast? I'm not entirely sure, but they're going to have to hire some really big executive people who know what they're talking about when it comes to MotoGP. Nonetheless, it's certainly interesting for sure. I think they've been working with some other companies. I know they worked with NBC years ago. It's very interesting, though, that MotoGP is talking about joining up with Fox in 2025, and I think it's very likely going to happen. They could join for 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about HKO Hollinger Racing. Now, we know the drivers are going to be joining HKO Hollinger Racing for the 2025 season. We haven't ever figured out what numbers the drivers are going to be running. Well, it's confirmed on Thursday that Stingray Robb is going to drive the number 77 car for the team in 2025, while Connor Daly is going to drive the number 78 this season. Stingray Robb had rumored to drive the number 78 car for 2025, but that is all change currently at the moment. Now, Stingray Robb going into this year, I don't really think that Stingray Robb is going to set the world on fire. A big reason why he is over at that team is because he brings sponsorships and funding to the table, which does certainly make a lot of sense why you would sign him in the first place. The driver I do expect to be the best of these two is Connor Daly. I think Connor Daly is actually going to have a pretty strong season with this program, especially on the ovals. He got that really impressive podium, and I think the first or second Milwaukee race, and I think Connor is a pretty good talent, despite the fact that Connor really hasn't been in the IndyCar world the last couple of years. It's good to see that he's getting the chance and opportunity to work with HKO. I think both drivers could have a good season. We'll see how they end up performing, though, in 2025 with the HKO Hollinger Racing organization for the upcoming year and upcoming season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Raymond Brothers Racing. As it was announced late Thursday evening that Raymond Brothers Racing has acquired the number 2 from Spire Motorsports and Rev Racing for the 2025 season. They also are expected to be run 3 full-time entries in 2025. So the numbers are going to be the number 2, the number 22, and the number 33 for this year. Now, we already know that Frankie Muniz is going to be driving the number 33 for the team in 2025. The big question is, what is going to happen to those other 2 trucks? Are they going to have rotation drivers behind the wheel of the other 2 trucks for this year, or is there going to be a full-time driver behind the wheel? There are some decent free agents not signed currently at the moment for 2025. Casgrove is one driver that I would think would be a really interesting driver to put behind the wheel. I would have to think Keith McGee would probably be back with this program, considering the fact he drove a ton of races for this team in 2024 and the last couple of years with this program, so I'm thinking he's probably going to be back with the team. Again, we know Frankie's going to be with the program. I am very intrigued to see what other drivers end up driving for this team in 2025. I think realistically, whoever they get is going to have to perform at a very, very strong level, because Ram, let's be real and honest, while they did have some decent runs with Lois Allen, which he could also come back to the team, even though it doesn't sound like he's going to be back with this program in 2025. We'll have to kind of wait, especially since, of course, he's going to Venturini, right? So we'll see what happens with the rest of the program for 2025. But it's interesting that they have acquired the number 2 truck from Rev Racing. We're going to talk about it in the second video that's coming out later today. But of course, they will be a 3-truck team in 2025, with announcements coming very, very soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ford. As it was reported by Marshall Pruitt by Racer.com a couple days ago on Thursday, that Ford is looking to get back to the top of IMSA in the next couple years, and they're looking at joining IMSA GTP, the GTP cars, for the near future. Now, they are not, of course, going to be joining the GTP class for the 2025 season, and it's noted by Marshall Pruitt in the article that 2026 is a very likely stretch at this point, especially with it being close to regulations already have to be started to be set for the 2026 year. That means that Ford is targeting 2027. Now, the last time Ford, I believe, was in IMSA GTP or the top classes back in like 2016 or 2017 when Chip Ganassi Racing, of course, had the Riley MK2 cars back in the mid-2010s. Kyle Larson, I think, won with the Riley car at the Rolex 24. Same as Scott Dixon. I remember him almost going back-to-back in those cars. And Chip Ganassi Racing's had a lot of success with Ford over the years, but then they transitioned to Ford GT in the mid-2010s, of course. And I gotta say, it'd be really cool to see a Ford GT joining up in IMSA GTP in 2027. They still have a pretty big prevalence in, of course, IMSA. But we're seeing GTP grow. We know Lamborghini is going to be joining up with them in the 2025 year. Same with Aston Martin, who I don't think is going to be running the Rolex this year, but they are expected to run some of the other IMSA events in 2025, including, I think, the 12 Hours of Sebring, I'm pretty sure. But I think it's good that Ford is looking to get back into the IMSA GTP, and I would love to see them compete overall. And the more GTP cars you can get on the racetrack, the better it's going to be, because there's more competition for the top, and the racing generally ends up being a lot better as a whole, which I think is what fans want overall. So it's interesting for sure, to say the least, and cool to see that it looks like that Ford could be looking to join IMSA GTP for the 2025, not 2025, but for the next couple years and the next couple of seasons. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Mexico City. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass late Thursday, the NASCAR has confirmed that full-time Cup drivers will be allowed to do the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Mexico City in June. This is going to tie into a story about Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain we're going to talk about at the end of this episode. But obviously, there were some people wondering when that announcement of SVG Racing in Mexico City came out. They're wondering, weren't Cup drivers not allowed to run the race? Well, Cup drivers will be able to run. Now, a lot of people are kind of questioning this move, and I can understand why a lot of fans that are fans of Cup drivers in the first place running in the series getting the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of an Xfinity Series car, because it gives them a disadvantage to everybody else, especially for the Cup Series. Well, I think a big reason why they're getting the opportunity to run the Xfinity race in Mexico is because Cup drivers have ran at the track before. Granted, I know it's been nearly 20 years. The last time NASCAR in any way, shape, or form raced at the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track was only back in 2008, and Kyle Busch was the winner of that race. But fans of the Mexico City area that have wanted to go see a NASCAR race for the first time in a long time, they pay a lot of tickets to go to that event, which is one of the reasons why they're going to be allowing this in the first place. So I would expect a lot of big names. We know SVG is going to be at this event. I would have to think that guys like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Joey Logano potentially, if AM does run a second car. Other guys in the Cup field, like I said, Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez especially, I would expect. I would think guys like Alex Bowman, William Byron, maybe Brad Keselowski, maybe some other drivers could come down and run the event, and maybe even Kyle Busch, considering that RSR is going to be running a third Xfinity Series car at some point this upcoming year. Nonetheless, it's an interesting rule change for the 2025 year. I know it's controversial for a lot of fans, believe me, but it's understandable why they're making the move, because they have been in Mexico before. It's not like Chicago, where they hadn't been there before, and they want to get them advantaged in. I get why fans are frustrated about it, but they made the move they made because they're going back to the track for the first time in many, many years. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Amber Balcaen. As it was announced late Thursday afternoon that Amber Balcaen will in fact be joining Nitro Motorsports part-time in 2025. While the number has not been officially confirmed for her ARCA car, she is expected to drive the number 70 machine for quite a few races in the upcoming season. Her schedule and the race that she will run will be announced at a later date. Now, this will mean that Nitro Motorsports, which will have an association with Venturini Motorsports for the 2025 year, they will have 2 cars on the racetrack. Remember, we talked about this late last week, but Thad Moffitt will be driving the number 46 car for the team this upcoming season. Now, Amber Balcaen is kind of a little bit of a controversial driver when it comes to performance. Amber, I'm going to be real and honest, really has struggled the last couple years. And Venturini Motorsports equipment, I know they haven't been as strong as they've been in previous years when guys like Jesse Love were in the series full time. But Amber Balcaen was struggling at times to stay on the lead lap, and there were a few races last year especially where she was multiple laps down. And I just don't think that Amber Balcaen is going to do much with this program at all. The only time I could see her having a chance and opportunity at being very competitive is when she does run super speedways. Outside of that, I'm not really expecting much from her, unfortunately, if I'm going to be real and honest. I just don't rate her as much as a driver. I'd like to see her succeed, don't get me wrong, but I just have not been impressed by what she has done on the racetrack. So I really hope she can perform, prove me wrong, and have a great season. But like I said, I'm very realistic about her opportunities, and I just don't feel confident about her getting the chance and opportunity of being very competitive. I don't see her doing amazing this upcoming year, and I think there definitely will be some struggles coming the way for her this season. I think there's going to be some wrecks that are going to end up taking place, and I think a lot of cars are going to get taken out because of some of the stuff on the track. We'll see how she ends up doing and if she can perform, but realistically, I'm not expecting her to set the world on fire with Nitro Motorsports in the 2025 ARCA season, though I will say it's good to see at least somewhat competitive car joining the track in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Katherine Legge. Now, Katherine Legge was most recently at the ARCA test that took place at Daytona International Speedway, and she was getting interviewed by the media about what the rest of her 2025 plans in regards to racing are going to be looking like. She is still, as she stated, working on her 2025 plans. She is looking to try to run the Indy 500 in 2025. It's unknown if she's going to make any more ARCA starts. She will be driving the number 23 car for Sigma Performance Services in the race at Daytona later this upcoming month, about a month or so from now. And she is looking to run some other races this year. She's also competing in the Chili Bowl Nationals this week. I think her night is Tuesday or Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that she has a decent chance and opportunity to be very, very competitive. She also could run some more IndyCar races also in 2025, but that has been unconfirmed at this moment in time. But it sounds like Dale Coyne Racing will be the most likely landing spot for her because a lot of the really good competitive seats are announced. You've also got the charter rules are coming into IndyCar in 2025, which I do think are going to affect some drivers like her and other drivers in the series having chances and opportunities to be in really strong and really good equipment. I think Katherine's a very talented driver, and it's pretty awesome to see that she is going to be racing in the ARCA event at Daytona International Speedway, which I think that she's in a pretty competitive car too, because that 23 car, if I'm not mistaken, won the ARCA race. I think it was at Phoenix last year or a couple years ago, and I think that she is one of the most talented female drivers we have seen. She's better than people like Haley Deegan and Tony Breidinger and all that kind of stuff, but I really would love to see her get a chance and opportunity down the road to maybe make her NASCAR Cup Series debut, even though I think that's very unlikely at this point. Still, it's pretty exciting to see that she's still working on her 2025 plans. I do think those will get announced here in the not-so-distant future, and I'm very intrigued to see what team she'll truly end up driving for in 2025. We'll see what team she ends up going with for 2025 in regards to IndyCar or other motorsports for the upcoming year and upcoming season. It sounds like she's working on those plans. We'll see where she ends up driving for in the Indy 500 also in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Anthony Alfredo. As it was announced in the middle of the afternoon on Thursday that Anthony Alfredo, as expected, will drive the 62 for Spire Motorsports in the 2025 Daytona 500. Spire Motorsports does not have a charter, so they will have to get in based on either speed on Wednesday or qualify their way in from the duels. Now, this, like I mentioned, has been expected that Anthony Alfredo was going to be a driver of the number 62 car. Now, the rest of Anthony Alfredo's plans have not been announced currently at the moment for the 2025 season, but I would think those are probably coming in the not-so-distant future on where he is going to be headed in 2025. It sounds like Young's Motorsports is the most likely landing spot for him in 2025. As for Anthony driving the Beer Motorsports car, it makes a lot of sense. If I'm not mistaken, I think he got a top 10 finish at Talladega Super Speedway, driving that number 62 car, and legitimately had a chance and opportunity to be pretty competitive at some of the Super Speedway races in 2024. And I think that he has a really good chance and opportunity. I'm looking at the entries, and we're going to talk about that here in just a short little bit. But when I look at the entries that are kind of like question marks for the Daytona 500 this year, he is probably the most likely surprise driver that I could see making it into this year's Daytona 500. I look at the competition. You've got, of course, Mike Wallace, who drive the 66 for MBM Motorsports. You've got Jimmy Johnson, who's expected to drive the 84 for Legacy. You've got Mark Truex Jr., who we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit on what ride he's likely going to be driving for. And you've also got other teams, and there's apparently some surprise teams that could show up for this year's Daytona 500. But I do got to say, I think he's got a really good opportunity here. Beer Motorsports is generally really, really competitive. We're expecting they're going to run all the Super Speedway races as well, which I would have to think that Anthony could be the driver for all those races for the upcoming year. I think Anthony's a really good talent, and I think it's good to see that he at least will have a ride at least for the Daytona 500. But again, like I've already mentioned, I do expect that Anthony Alfredo will have more races with Beer Motorsports in 2025, and I also do believe that his plans are going to get announced here in the not-so-distant future on what he's going to end up officially doing for 2025. I'm excited to see what he can do with this team. I think he's got a great opportunity here to definitely make the Daytona 500 with Beer Motorsports in 2025, like he did in 2024 with Beer. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, Spire Motorsports has not announced all their numbers for the Truck Series lineup for 2025. However, we kind of talked about this on the channel, and it was confirmed from Joseph Wrigley from TobyChristie.com. He has confirmed the numbers that they are going to be using for 2025. The numbers they're going to be using: the 07, the 7, the 71, and the 77. The 71 we already know will be a full-time driver for the upcoming year. Raj Kruf is going to be back with the number 71 team for 2025 after a very solid season. We do think that Kevin Bonio Manning, who was a crew chief on the number 2 truck for Rev Racing, is going to likely be the crew chief for Raja Kruf in 2025. We also got confirmation, we're going to talk about this as well, but Corey Day is going to run in 8 truck races with this team in 2025. So the 7 truck will be an all-star truck this upcoming season. I would also look for drivers like Carson Hocebar to make a few starts. Kyle Busch will make a few starts also this year in that truck most likely. Michael McDowell's name has been mentioned, and Brendan Butterman Quinn is another name that could be a potential possibility. And I will throw Casgrall out there because I know it was mentioned from the NASCAR Massage Count not too long ago that there was a really good possibility that he could be full-time. There is a chance he could also end up being part-time with this program in 2025. And I won't throw out the possibility of them getting like a Connor Zill to run a few races in the 7 or the 07 car. The 07 truck is going to end up being a truck that is not going to run every race. It's going to be another all-star truck with some different drivers that may not be in the series. You don't know at this point, but I think that truck will run quite a few races as well. The 77 truck will be the other full-time truck with one driver, and the name that I've continued to hear is Andres Perez de Laura. Andres Perez was with Rev Racing and ARCA competition, and it's expected that he is going to be part of this program in 2025. I don't think Andres is going to set the world on fire with this team, unfortunately. I think Andres is a talented driver. He, of course, won the ARCA championship last year, and I think that he does have some potential to be really, really good. I just don't really have confidence in him being like a major championship threat and serious contender this upcoming season. I just don't look for him to be a playoff contender fully. I could be wrong. He makes the playoffs this year. You never know. He could truly make the playoffs this year, but I'm just not quite sure because Andres didn't win a race in ARCA last year, so it's kind of like questions up there. I would have rather seen a veteran driver like a Casgrall or a Brett Moffitt get behind the wheel of that seat, because I think a veteran driver being at that team would make a lot more sense to kind of help Roger Kruf out just a little bit. Now, we'll wait to see when the rest of the stuff gets announced from Spire, but I do think the rest of those announcements are going to be coming in the not-so-distant future on what that team is going to be doing for 2025 in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mavis Tire. Now, this is a story that kind of went under the radar unless you've been on social media on Twitter. But if I'm not mistaken, Coca-Cola put out their most recent ad on all the drivers and be part of the NASCAR racing family for 2025. And if you take a look at Denny Hamlin's fire suit, one big sponsor that you probably noticed is not on there is Mavis Tire. And if you actually take a look at the partner page as well, they also are no longer listed as a sponsor for Denny Hamlin currently at the moment for 2025. Now, this can mean one of two things. Number one, they're completely gone from the team for the 2025 year. Or number two, they're still working on negotiations in regards to contracts, and they could have a deal done soon to keep Mavis Tire for 2025. But they got to get working on that because we're about a month away from the start of this season. We're only 3 weeks away from the Clash, so they need to get that figured out really, really quickly before the season starts. But let's say Mavis Tire is officially gone from Joe Gibbs Racing and Denny Hamlin. That is two big sponsors that Denny Hamlin had for 2025. They're no longer there. FedEx has left the team. They sponsored in 14 races in 2024 for Denny Hamlin. FedEx has completely gone from Joe Gibbs Racing. They're not just gone from JGR, but they have completely exited the sport going into 2025. And then you think about Mavis. Mavis sponsored almost half the races for Denny Hamlin, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And that's another big sponsor that may be gone. And that's why I worry about Denny Hamlin and his future a little bit, because Denny Hamlin may be in the same situation that Kyle Busch was in 2022 when he was trying to figure out negotiations on what sponsors he was going to have for the upcoming season. And Kyle Busch unfortunately just left Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of 2022 because Joe had offered him a smaller contract. And of course, Kyle wanted a bigger deal, and Joe wasn't going to pay as much to Kyle as Kyle was really wanting. I can see Denny Hamlin being in a much similar position going into 2025 if they cannot find a sponsor for him in this upcoming season. Now, if Mavis Tire does officially come back this upcoming year, or they don't go away, what sponsor could replace Mavis Tire? Well, I think about Kings Hawaiian, right? Kings Hawaiian is not signed with any team for 2025. They're not going to be back with RFK Racing this upcoming season. So I could see Kings Hawaiian stepping up and sponsoring Denny. I could also see Campbell's. We know Campbell's is going to have a pretty close tie with Joe Gibbs Racing and the team over there, the Harris Blitzer Group, this upcoming year. So I'd have to think that's a really big possibility for the 2025 year as well. But I think this Mavis Tire story is a lot bigger because it really affects Denny Hamlin in his long-term future with this team. If they lose another big sponsor for Hamlin, unless Sports Clip can step up to the plate, I think Hamlin's future as team could definitely be a little bit in question, especially since they've lost sponsors over there at 2311, the team that Denny owns. Moneyline's no longer listed. Dr. Pepper's no longer listed. And there's some other companies' futures that are in question with the team. Love's could have been gone. McDonald's could have been gone with the lawsuit and stuff. And Monster was almost going to lead the team with the lawsuit. So I think Hamlin's future is definitely a little bit in question currently at the moment. We'll have to wait and see, though, in regards to that when it comes to the future of Denny Hamlin, when it comes to some of that stuff for 2025 on the sponsorship front. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about an updated look at the Daytona 500 entry list. With less than 35 days from the 2025 Daytona 500, most of the entries have been officially announced. Julio Castroneves will drive the Project 91 entry for the upcoming season. Mike Walsh is going to drive the number 66 for MBM Motorsports. There is expected to be NY Racing with JJ Yeley as well. And we also know there's some other big rides still need to be announced for 2025. But there are 3 teams in particular that if you notice from Joseph Strigley's page, the first one is Richard Childress Racing. RCR is a team that's been rumored they could enter a car in the 2025 Daytona 500, and it seems like there's a really good possibility of that. Now, I had thought maybe Chandler Smith would be there, but obviously, of course, Chandler Smith went to front row for 2025. I don't think front row is going to, of course, be fielding a 4th car, especially with the charter stuff going on and the lawsuit going on at the moment. I don't see that being a possibility for 2025. If RCR does field the car for the Daytona 500 in 2025, the most likely option would be Austin Hill. Austin Hill's a really good super speedway racer. He's won, I think, the last 3 straight years, the race at Daytona, I'm pretty sure. So Austin Hill would make the most perfect sense to get behind the wheel of that, and I think he will probably end up being the driver in that number 21 car, or not 21, the 33, because we know they're going to be bringing that 33 car into the Cup Series this upcoming season. If they do enter, I think it will be Austin Hill behind the wheel. Let's move on to talk about Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware has not only one, but two cars that do need to be announced for the Daytona 500. The first one is obviously going to be the driver of the number 51. Now, we had thought maybe Corey LaJoie was going to be part of this program for 2025. That is not going to be the case. Now, he could be part-time in the number 15 car, but we are expecting that Cody Ware is going to drive the number 51 car for Rick Ware Racing in 2025. I've already given my thoughts on this. I think Corey LaJoie would have made more sense, but also Cody Ware is the son of Rick Ware. And to be fair, Cody Ware last time ran at Daytona, he got a top 5, so I could see Cody Ware being okay at Daytona, and I'm fine with him being in that car for Daytona. I'm just not sure about him being full-time. As for the number 15 car, there are multiple candidates who could get behind the wheel. I could see a driver from the NASCAR Xfinity Series getting an opportunity, like a Harrison Burton. We could see Sheldon Creed or Sam Mayer make their NASCAR Cup Series debut, and someone else from that pipeline could get an opportunity as well. Or maybe they choose someone like not J.J. Ely, but someone like a Kaz Grall again to get behind the wheel. That could certainly be a possibility. Or what about Tim Brown? Tim Brown's going to be driving in the Clash Rider team, so that could certainly be a possibility. But we'll have to wait and see on that front. And finally, let's talk about Martin Truex Jr. There's been a big rumor going around that Martin Truex Jr. is going to be driving in a car that's fielded by Tricon Garage. Now, David Gillen went on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio not too long ago, and he did say that they're not going to be building the car for him at the Daytona 500, and they're focused on the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. What I do expect is that Tricon is going to be Tricon in name. Joe Gibbs Racing will have a 5th car out on the racetrack. It just can't be under the Joe Gibbs Racing umbrella because they have 4 charters for the upcoming season, and is under the old rule as well. You can't have a 5th part-time entry under ownership, so they would have to go to a different source. And 2011 is not fielding a car for Martin Truex Jr. That had been the original plans, but they're not fielding a car for Martin Truex Jr., neither like Carl Lawrence, Kurt Busch, most likely as well. But I think that you're going to end up seeing Truex in a Tricon car, and I think that's going to get announced here not too far down the road, by the way. Again, Joe Gibbs is going to pair the car. It's just going to be the Tricon name, but it's going to be a Joe Gibbs Racing car as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to the Daytona 500 entrance and what else does end up getting officially announced. But I do think some big announcements are coming in regards to the rest of the Daytona 500 entrance, as we're only about 5 weeks away. We'll see who ends up getting behind the wheel of these cars for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Corey Day. As it was announced early Thursday morning that Corey Day has signed a development contract with Hendrick Motorsports and is officially signed with Hendrick Motorsports for the 2025 season. He is going to run 30 races across multiple different series in 2025, going in from trucks, Xfinity, ARCA, and Trans Am. It was also confirmed on Thursday as well that he'll run 8 Truck Series races in the number 7 truck for Spire Motorsports in 2025, confirming 8 of the 25 races for that number 7 truck this upcoming year in season. It was also announced that 4 of those races will also be in the ARCA number 77 Spire machine. So Spire, for the first time I think in a very long time, is going to be fielding a car in ARCA competition in 2025. So we know the ARCA starts and the truck starts for Corey Day in 2025. Now, I talked about this on the channel on Thursday when it was officially confirmed and announced. But Corey Day is very high up on the Chevy pipeline. And for those who do not know who Corey Day is one of the best dirt drivers we have seen come up to the ranks in a very, very long time. He won a lot of races in high limit in 2024. I think he won 14 or 15 races in high limit. Also won some races in the World of Outlaws as well. And also in his debut on pavement in 2024 and the Cars Tour in 2024. I think he almost won on debut and was very, very quick racing big late models as well. He also made a couple starts in ARCA in 2024 and had a very impressive run going at Salem, running in second right behind William Swalch before unfortunately making a mistake and taking himself out. And then he got a top 10, of course, at Bristol Motor Speedway. And then he ran some Truck Series races in 2024 and had some decent results. He had some decent top 20 runs going, which for someone that doesn't have a lot of pavement experience, I think is actually very, very impressive. He has been praised very heavily by Kyle Larson and Jeff Gordon. two of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. And Rick Hendrick did say in a statement that when you have two guys like Jeff Gordon and Kyle Larson really praising you and saying that he's the next big thing, you really take notice. And Corey Day has been on the radar of Hendrick Motorsports over the course of the last couple of years. Now, we do not know the full Xfinity Series schedule and the Trans Am schedule for 2025, but we do know, of course, that Corey Day is going to be in the number 17 truck for Hendrick Motorsports. But we have usually seen drivers outsource other teams that were part of the Hendrick development contract, like Chase Elliott and William Byron, Alex Bowman, all under the Hendrick development contract. They went to other teams like Junior Motorsports. I don't think that Corey Day is going to be that case. I think that he will end up driving in the number 17 car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, how many races, I'm not entirely sure, but we do know the 17 car is expected to come back in 2025, but also would expect drivers like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, and William Byron to get behind the wheel of that car as well this year when Cup drivers are allowed to run. But I think that Corey Day is a very talented driver. Now, he did make some mistakes in ARCA and kind of showed a little bit of that not being nice driver out there at times. And I know that he, and I think it was Andy Jankowiak who got into a little bit of beef. I think it was in Michigan, I'm pretty sure, Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that Corey Day has a lot of raw potential, and I think this is a fantastic opportunity for him going into 2025. Now, what are my expectations for Corey Day this year? I do think Corey Day will be a contender for wins at times with Spire Motorsports. I don't think he's going to win a race with Spire, but I think it will be a contender, and same thing goes for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I don't think he's going to be going out there and winning races, and I don't think he'll win a race at all in 2025, but I could definitely see him being pretty competitive, and I think there'll be some top 10s and a couple top 5s as well. Long term, I do think he will need to eventually end up winning with the teams he ends up driving for if he wants to stay with Hendrick long term, because long term, I think he'll be in a Hendrick Motorsports NASCAR Cup Series car. It forms really well. You think about the current drivers under contract at Hendrick Motorsports currently at the moment. You do have guys, of course, like William Byron under contract here with Hendrick, but I do expect William Byron to get an extension with Hendrick Motorsports. Alex Bowman's contract only goes through 2026, but I do think Bowman deserves another extension at least through 2028. And then, of course, you have Kyle Larson, whose contract goes through 2026, and Chase Elliott goes through 2027. I think all four drivers are going to stay with Hendrick at least through 2026, and I don't think anything's going to be changing at least for the next few years. But that's not the plan right now. Corey Day will just do a development contract right now, and I think that he, like I said, he has a lot of potential and has shown a lot of raw speed in whatever he's ended up driving for. I really hope he can do really, really good. He seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and I think working with Hendrick and being close to the team and working with Kyle Larson, who's one of the best drivers in the field, arguably the best driver in the NASCAR Cup Series field, working with him really closely, I think is going to help in a pretty big way. And I think he, like I said, he has a lot of potential to be very, very successful in 2025 in the series he ends up driving for. So I'm excited for his future. I think he's going to be very, very competitive, and I truly think he'll have the pace and speed to be very, very competitive in 2025. Looking forward to see how he can do in the 2025 season and see how he can end up doing under the Hendrick Motorsports development contract for 2025 with this team and this program. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain. Now, we did a video covering this story late Thursday, but it was announced on Thursday late afternoon that both Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain are going to be driving for Junior Motorsports part-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025, driving a number 9 car. They will combine for 9 races combined in 2025. Ross Chastain will race at Circuit of the Americas, Darlington, Nashville, Dover, and Iowa Speedway, while Shane Van Gisbergen will do all road course races in 2025. His first race will be at Mexico City, which Cup drivers have been confirmed to run the event, the Chicago Street Course in July, Sonoma in July, and Watkins Glen. Shane Van Gisbergen, let's begin with him really, really quick. This is going to be the first time he's in top-tier equipment in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. While Kaulig Racing is a solid team, and they had some really good runs, and he got 3 wins on road courses there, Kaulig Racing equipment has been off the pace over the course of the last couple of years, and yet SVG willed that equipment and did really, really good with the team. Now he's going to be with Junior Motorsports, and we know that their program over there at Junior Motorsports on road courses is exceptional. Sam Mayer in the last couple of years when he drove for the team at Junior Motorsports, he was very, very good. But I do think in 2025, both Connor Zilisch and SVG, when they go up against each other on the road courses, I really think both those guys are going to put on a really good show. I think that Connor Zilisch still might have the advantage because Connor is an exceptional talent on road courses. We saw what he did at Watkins Glen in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024 at Watkins Glen, and what he did in the ARCA race that same weekend as well, and what he showed in the Truck Series. So I think these two are going to put on a really, really good show. Let's move on to talk about Ross Chastain next. Ross Chastain is going to be on top-tier equipment in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for the first time. And I think Chastain, instead of going to a team like DGM, he's got a great opportunity here. I think you've got to look at Darlington being a really good track for him to win. He is very good at Darlington, has won a truck race there, has been competitive in Xfinity competition. That's where he really got his big break with Chip Ganassi Racing. And then COTA. You got to look at COTA too. He is very, very good at Circuit of the Americas. Won his first ever Cup race at that track. Really good there in Xfinity and truck competition too. And he's a really underrated road course racer as well. And I think that you'll see him do very, very good with that team. And I think he gets a win or two. Again, my prediction is that Ross Chastain and Shane Van Gisbergen both will win. I think SVG gets a win or two. Chastain wins one race. So I think combined 3 wins are going to come into play. But the one big thing I noticed about this announcement is the fact that Daniel Suarez was not mentioned as a driver for this number 9 car. Daniel Suarez is only under contract right now with Trackhouse Racing for 2025. But the fact you've got Connor, SVG, and Chastain racing together in some shape or form in 2025 and Suarez not being there in that car kind of tells me that there's a really good chance and possibility that this could be the last year for Suarez at Trackhouse Racing if he really doesn't step up. And even if Suarez does step up a little bit in 2025, I'm not sure he'll be able to stay because Connor Zilisch I really expect to be very, very good in 2025. But I also think that this partnership with the Trackhouse team in Junior Motorsports is also not the most surprising thing either too, because we kind of expected this, especially with Connor being outsourced over to Junior Motorsports for 2025. We all knew that there was going to be a 5th part-time entry for 2025, probably not Dale Jr. behind the wheel. We all kind of thought that this was the most likely scenario. Now, I don't think SVG is going to be the only driver, and same with Ross Chastain. I'd have to think Connor Hall, who is going to be part of Junior Motorsports late model program for 2025. I'm thinking he is going to end up being a driver in this car for a few races. If Dale Jr. finds a sponsorship and Budweiser wants to see him run an Xfinity competition, he could, even though I don't think Dale Jr. is going to get behind the wheel. There are some other drivers. I could see some Cup guys, maybe Kyle Busch down the road perhaps getting an opportunity in the 9, and maybe some other guys down the road getting really good opportunities here. But going back to SVG and Chastain, both guys, I think, like I've already mentioned and said, are going to be very, very fast and super, super competitive in this equipment. And I do think that there are going to be wins coming for this car. I don't think sponsorship was announced for this car either. I have to think WeatherTech will be on SVG's cars. Well, Ross will probably have Kubota, and the companies that have worked with him in the past will probably work closely with him or more closer in 2025. We'll just have to wait and see. But again, very much think that these guys are going to perform very, very well in this seat and this car in 2025. There's a great opportunity for both Ross and Shane. And again, I really do truly believe that Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain, especially with them getting a top-tier opportunity in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, I think both are going to excel. I think both are going to do an exceptional, really, really good job. And I think wins are definitely coming the way for both these guys in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. We'll see how they end up doing and performing in this Junior Motorsports car in 2025. We'll see how they can do this upcoming year and season. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Shane Van Gisbergen will win some Xfinity race in 2025 or not? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And what thoughts about Corey Dane being under development contract for Hendrick? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. In the next hour or so, we're going to see another NASCAR news video going through everything that got announced on Friday and Saturday and Sunday as well. Then if there's any news that breaks throughout the day, we'll have it live on the channel as well. Tuesday could be a news video, but could also be an early look at the Xfinity driver lineup. We'll have to wait and see. There's going to be an updated Cup lineup looking at that, as we're only about 2.5 weeks from the Clash at this point. We've got content on people like Connor Zilisch, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Bubba Walls, Haley Deegan, all that kind of stuff, Kyle Busch, you name it, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, all that kind of stuff dropping on the channel as we get closer to the start of 2025. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.